Okay, hello everybody. My name's Julian, this is Dee. We both work for ThoughtWorks and our roles is around transformation in organisations. And today is really a story over a 12-month period where we work with one of our clients, and really it's warts and all, really what was going on there and what we had to do to address some of those challenges, and also some of the things that we experienced that hopefully will be good warning signs for you if you're in some similar kind of situation. So, Dee, do you want to just click on to the agenda? It's just died.
First hurdle. It has just died.
I'll wait for that to recover. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is how do we get engaged with the client? What did we do to engage with them initially? And what was it they're actually looking to achieve? The journey we went on with them and their IT department, but also the journey they went on in working with us to establish some new agile principles across the whole of their business, and equally at the same time, how we actually enabled them to be able to continue their transformation too. So we didn't become critical to the ongoing development of their ways of working. And we will save questions to the end if that's okay, because as Dee has already said, we've got quite a lot to get through, but we will try and save a few minutes for that. And
It's working now. Yeah.
ThoughtWorks, we're all about developing software. We don't need to say too much more than that, apart from the fact that we work as a smaller part of the organisation. It's about helping other clients deliver software like we do. And so that's really what we're trying to achieve. And this story, as it says here, is based on actual events, but we've had to anonymise it. You know, some people get a little touchy when you want to talk about exactly all warts and all the challenges they experienced and where they started from. I'm sure they'd love to talk about where they are today, but that's not really the best part of the story. The story is really about how we got to that point. So I'm going to talk briefly now about arriving at the bank. And I arrived into the bank very much in the unknown. My challenge was that I knew that this business department had some challenges. They weren't particularly keen to explain them all to us in advance, but they were very keen to get us in to give them a hand. And so it really was a journey into the unknown. So, a globally systemically important bank, what that means is it's recognised that if they go down, they bring down economies. And in Europe, they're recognised as one of those banks. Like all banks, huge amount of regulation and scrutiny placed upon them. You know, nobody wants some of those financial crashes again. So they want to ensure that the banks have really got their act together. And part of that is about the reporting and compliance that they need to be able to perform within the bank. That allows them to keep the auditors happy, to keep the financial bodies happy as well. But that takes a lot of time and effort, and it requires a lot of synchronization across the organization and between the business and IT to make that work. But they had some challenges. It wasn't all working. They had some challenges in actually producing those reports reliably and actually managing the time it took to be able to do that. It was creating a lot of strain on their people in the organization as well. And so they had to be doing something about it. The staff were extremely stressed about this whole thing. And so the initial piece of work we were asked to do was to kind of discover where they're actually at and also what could be done to try and address some of those challenges. We were not expected to walk in and produce a huge PowerPoint report and then kind of go, there you go, that'll fix all your problems. We were expected to actually get hands-on and help them change things quickly. We were going to be, in our first 6 weeks, thrown into the deep end in many new things as well. The first day I arrived on site with the bank, we walked straight into the building and they said, great, we've amassed a full team of people for you to immediately hear all their problems, and we're going to throw you in the room for the next 2 hours and they'll all explain to you exactly what they need fixing. A little daunting, I must admit. But the key thing for us was, how can we process the information that we've been receiving? How can we determine where we can make some differences really quickly? And what is it about their relationships internally in the department and externally to other areas, such as IT, that really needs to be addressed? What was kind of something we could do to really make a difference for them? As I mentioned earlier, the current problems were producing discrepancies in their reporting, and I'm not joking, in the millions of euros. Sometimes there was 9 numbers in there, 9 digits in these numbers, in the discrepancies in their reports. Now, you know, they may be a bank and they may feel they can sweep some of that under the carpet, but that's not going to go with the financial authorities. So they had to find out what's going wrong in these processes. And to be honest, they weren't really sure whether that was because of mistakes within their own department or mistakes within the systems that they were asking to deliver them the data they needed to be able to produce these reports. So a lot of ambiguity in there. We immediately were trying to find root causes, of course, and how can we facilitate the removal? Because we weren't quite sure where the root cause was. It could be anywhere in the people, process, and technology. We had to discover that. So what came next? Well, I mean, we were in there for 6 weeks, but what we didn't realize at the time was that this was just a little piece of the picture they were giving us, because they just wanted to check whether we could actually do something of value for them. We were genuinely being tested, we discovered, after a few weeks. We were also, though, getting some very nice feedback. The classic, you're not like other consultancies, because we weren't insisting on sitting in a room on our own, creating the PowerPoint and wanting to just hand over this big report at the end. We're natural problem solvers. We're software people. We love to get our hands dirty. And the moment we saw things that needed to get fixed, our natural inclination was to get stuck in. Now, we had to temper some of that, of course, because we need to prioritize what would actually make the biggest difference. But we were very hands-on. And some of the people who were giving feedback really allowed us to get into what was truly happening. I know that our key sponsor, she was head of all regulatory reporting. And she came to me one day and says, I think you guys are going to pass the test. I said, well, we haven't issued any report or anything yet. I'm afraid Birgitta, who's basically is typically under the cosh for all of our work, what we're doing, came to me today and said, she likes working with you people, can they please stay? And she says, she never says that about anybody because she's always so focused and stressed about the job at hand. So it had to be a different approach. It had to be getting to work closely with people, and we had to become trusted advisors, it says here. People really needed to feel that they could work with us closely, share their problems, and be able to allow us then to what's technically known as get behind the curtain, not as scary as it sounds, but in their environment, that's where all the secure knowledge of what's really going on in the reporting was going on, and we needed to be really build up the trust to be allowed to see that data and that information.
Cool.
So I'm going to hand to Dee, and she can start talking about some of the challenges in working between the business and IT.
Cool. So Julian just said there we needed to augment our team. I wasn't there for that first 6-week period, but I was brought in to help with some of these other activities that they'd identified. One of which was aligning with Agile IT. So we were actually called in to work in a business department, the regulatory reporting department. IT were very much a separate silo, and IT had decided they were going to go Agile. So they'd brought in a different consultancy who had produced a pretty awesome 140 slide, comprehensive, as they put it, target operating model for everyone to work with. And with 2 weeks' notice, they came to the business and said, you need to be product owners. We need you to tell us what we're going to work on. We're going to work in this agile way, and here's this comprehensive slide pack, our target operating model, which outlines exactly how we're going to work together. The business asked if there was any training or any explanation of how they were going to work in this new agile way and what was a product owner at the end of the day. And they said, don't worry, we're going to have a kickoff. So they had an hour-and-a-half kickoff, again, with lots and lots of slides, trying to talk people through the target operating model. Business were pretty bamboozled at this point about what it was that they were letting themselves in for. And just to complicate matters even more, they wanted to kick it off the week before Christmas because it had to happen. Promises had been made to a senior stakeholder that it would be done by the end of Q4. So just a few little constraints that we had to work from. And, you know, they wanted to just do it. But as it worked, it really, as outlined, it wasn't going to work. So what could they do about it? Well, the first thing they did, actually, was the business put their feet down and said, no way, we absolutely cannot just be told what to do in this way. We don't understand what it is that you're asking of us. You can't just give us a PowerPoint deck and expect us to be able to pick it up and work with you. So one of the things that these additional activities that we were going to help them with was to try and help the business to work with an Agile IT organisation. So one of the first things that I did, it's a picture of me there with lots of Post-it notes because we love a Post-it note, was try and find out how the business felt about this. So what were the hopes, but also what were the fears? I mean, you know, we'd heard a lot about what the fears were, but actually what were some of the positive things about working with IT more closely, being more aligned? Because at that time, they were very, very siloed organisations. So the first thing that we did, having sort of consolidated and collated all of those hopes and fears, was actually, I'm a great fan of just getting everybody in a room together and getting people to thrash it out. So not IT telling business, not business telling IT that they couldn't do it, but actually let's all get round a table, or even better, let's get round a wall with a whole bunch of post-it notes, and let's try and work out what it is that we need to do. So we did a road mapping exercise to try and find out what were the key areas that we actually needed to collaborate on, and we appointed some change leads to work on those areas to try and work out how they were actually going to work together. So the things that came out were things like requirements. You know, how are we going to identify requirements? How are we going to document those requirements in such a way that we can actually pass them over to IT as they were asking us to do? Well, actually, wouldn't it be even better if we got the people who owned the requirements, these product owners, sitting with the teams? Okay, that's not going to work. The teams are in India. It's all been outsourced to a third party. So we can't do that. What's the next best way that we can actually try and get people to work together in that way? How are we going to get testing done? How are we going to try and bring testing a little bit further forward in the life cycle so that we don't have this big piece at the end? Because the agile mechanism that was being promoted in this target operating model was actually what I would call water scrumfall. So big upfront requirements, some agile cross-functional teams over in India actually developing, and then a big testing phase at the end before anything got deployed. So how could we work through some of those problems? You can see quite formal. We had quite a lot of senior stakeholders involved going through this exercise, and we came up with a number of sort of key areas that we were going to work on together. So some of the key approaches that we took into this were, you know, having this idea of joint business and IT change leads. It wasn't about IT telling the business how they needed to work with them. It wasn't about business saying, this is how we're going to work with you. It was actually getting people together and talking about how do we best work together to actually approach this problem and overcoming it. We created some shared training. There was no training, there was no time for training, but we took the sort of outline of the target operating model, and Julian and I created some training courses that we then took everybody through. IT people, business people, together, so that everybody was using the same vocabulary and everybody was on the same page in terms of what it was that we were going to do. We started facilitating some agile events to try and establish some good habits. So working as agile coaches, sitting with the teams, you know, doing it in a distributed way with the people from India over sort of video conference, using tools, anything that was going to work in order to try and sort of, again, bring about a bit more of a collaborative approach. We introduced some sort of visual planning mechanisms. Obviously, with an India development team, that wasn't that easy, but for the actual program of work that we were trying to do with the change leads, we came up with this sort of Kanban board, and you can see it was a movable whiteboard that we could just keep in an open public area of the office space so that everybody could actually see what was happening as well. We weren't hiding anything away. We were being very, very open and transparent about it. This was fundamentally different to the working behind the curtain model. And that was a physical curtain, incidentally. It was a curtain that was drawn across a certain area of the office when they worked on the regulatory reports so that nobody could look over their shoulder and see any of the figures. And we sort of replicated a lot of the work that we were doing in Jira as well so that we could use it more easily with the distributed teams. So a bit of a timeline of sort of the approach that we took. We started out with how do we request a change? We started out looking at the small improvements area, as they called it. So IT had wanted this big bang approach across 15 different teams, all at the same time. We're going to go agile. But we thought, let's start small, and then once we've established a good way of working together, let's then scale that up. So we started out with small changes. We looked at the process for that. We worked through an end-to-end sort of flow of what happens from a change being identified to it being documented, to working together with the team to try and deliver that change in a good way. And we came up with an initial sort of improvement process that we agreed together with business and IT was going to work. We then, I'm trying to think of the right word to use here. We slimmed down the 140-slide target operating model and sort of created a light version of it that we thought everybody could get behind and work with. And we brought in some new capabilities around training and coaching, working together with people. We also then started to scale that out across other sort of system areas of the IT department. So we then started looking at the sort of defect fixing area, the tech support area. That was very, very easy to sort of leverage what we'd done with the small improvements. But then we also started looking at some of the big programs of work areas as well, and how we could take a similar type of model and adapt it for some of those areas. And then finally, what we very much wanted to do is we didn't want to be there for years and years and years working with people. We wanted to ensure that we had a coaching community set up that actually were enabled enough to continue the work that we've been doing, and that we could exit stage left and move on to other projects.
So it's fair to say we were quite disruptive in this whole process. I mean, that Dee didn't reflect on the fact that when you actually dragged all the business people and the IT people into the room together, at the end they said, that went quite well, didn't it? And you're, why is that? It says, we've never talked to each other before, we've never been in the same room before, which was quite an eye-opener for us. But actually just dragging people into the room and actually getting them to talk together was, again, at the time, extremely disruptive, but it made a big difference. And you'll see with some of the visualizations you saw in that pristine working environment with the whiteboard and post-it notes. Again, that was a bit of a, oh my goodness, you guys are really out on a tangent with actually visualizing things. So we did a lot more of that. So let's move into what we also got invited to do, was not only help the business address their working and collaboration with IT, which I guess is a more natural set of agile aspirations, but we also looked to how we could help them with their own business transformation project as well. How could we help them apply the same principles and practices that we've talked about with working with IT, to be able to apply those same agile principles and practices through their own internal transformation program? So they had an ambition to move to greater operational excellence. They definitely needed to stop some of these challenges of firefighting. I mentioned the data quality. They also needed to get this work-life balance sorted out. And they were right on the edge of quite a lot of turnover and losing of some of their top people if they didn't start to address some of this. But equally though, they needed to basically put in place a highly effective reporting organisation, because the bank needed that most of all. So they had a clear goal of what we were trying to achieve, but how were we going to establish a direction against this goal? So the first thing we did was actually gather all these key stakeholders together, again, into a workshop. As you can see, all very formally attired in here, very business-like. And the key thing for us, after letting them feel comfortable, sat in a nice kind of plenary space here, we then started to have some fun with them, little games like this one over here, very lots of comfort zone and personal space, but trying to break them down into, not literally break them, but trying to
we don't do that to clients.
Trying to break down some of the uptight nature and the very formal attitudes they had around how they were going to work and collaborate together, and start to make this much more of a big collaboration, a bit more fun around how they were going to achieve these outcomes. This workshop, though, took a lot of preparation. 2 days, 30 stakeholders in the room. It actually took quite a few of us to manage and maintain that level, and please never undertake such a thing thinking it's going to be easy. It takes a lot of time and prep to make a success. But the great thing was that we got fantastic outcomes out of this, and we'll show you a few of those. So one really key thing we wanted to ensure was that everybody had a common view of what it was we were trying to achieve. Yes, they said for themselves, we are no longer firefighters, we are analysts, as in we are actually here to employ our skills looking at the bank itself and not just constantly fighting fires day in, day out. We also made sure that they had 24 in total initiatives of change in the department, a lot of which were built around hypotheses that if we do this, it will deliver us this value in our business. But for each of those hypotheses, we had to get them to list out their elevator pitch, their scope definition, what key things are going to be delivered as part of that, some kind of epic descriptions at the bottom here, and then also bells of success, as the nickname came. What will we be able to see along the way that demonstrates that this initiative is adding value, that we should continue to invest in it? And how can we get those bells of bells of success exposed as quickly as possible to really validate that we should be doing this. Equally too, if we're going to have a high level of collaboration amongst 23 plus one coordinating initiative, how are we going to ensure we manage dependency? And this little exercise we ran over here, which originally was on a tabletop, made it much easier than on the wall like that, was all about trying to give everybody the opportunity to say, my initiative is really dependent upon your activities over here, and vice versa. We need to ensure we bear this in mind and make sure that we get this collaboration in place right from the start. So we got a lot of good value out of that workshop because it really got us kicked off in the right direction. Generally though, when we were working with them in this improvement program, I mean, it was their program to run. They were the business subject matter experts. They were the people that had to take ownership and be empowered to deliver each one of these initiatives. But we were there to be catalysts to make sure that they remained focused. They used really good principles and techniques to ensure they were delivering value constantly, and that we helped them ensure that they cut away those initiatives that they realized weren't going to deliver value, and that really the focus should shift to something else. So what the kind of things we did, I don't know if you've ever seen Shoot for the Moon Futurespective sessions. That was actually the graphics right at the start. Not looking back too much, but actually thinking forward. If that's our end goal, what will our journey look like? What asteroids will we need to pass on the way to our journey to the moon? Very relevant at the moment, of course, 50 years on. But the moon landings were all about, I have a goal, I have an objective, I have a vision of what we really want to achieve, and then determining what it was take us to get there. And we had to do that for every single one of those initiatives with them. We could facilitate that, and that made a big difference to them. Obviously, they had to understand what benefits of these practices were going to work in their environment. It took a little bit more education. We'd done the focus on the people relating to IT, but now we're looking at the people having to collaborate inside the business, and this was a new audience for us than before. Obviously, I talked about dependencies, but getting those understood was really important. Visual management. I won't talk too much about it today because Dee's got a workshop there tomorrow morning. We're looking at all about visualizing work and actually bringing out a number of the examples from this case study. They're going to be part in that workshop tomorrow morning. What time is it tomorrow morning, Dee?
Oh, 10:30.
10:30.
Double session. Takes you through to lunchtime. Be great.
So visualization of the work for transparency, absolutely key. Make sure everybody truly understands what's being done and how they can participate in that. We also made sure we had a specific area for collaboration and focus on change. So people had their day jobs at their desks, but also if they felt they needed to get away from that and get to a space where they could put some focus on transformation, they could come to that safe zone and know they'd get some peace and quiet, or the chance to collaborate with us as ThoughtWorks or other initiative leaders in that space. We talked about goals a lot. We constantly reminded people about goals. In fact, we were constantly looking at, are they working towards their goals? Continuous improvement. Dee mentioned about improvement coaches and facilitators. We had to ensure that they could keep driving this for themselves. We made sure originally that we were running the retrospectives, but for them to constantly think about, is this the right way to run these initiatives, was really important. Value-driven mindset, as I mentioned, bells of success. We really wanted them to be able to come up every 2 weeks at the big showcase event and ring that bell and basically say, look at the value we've delivered already. I know we thought this would take 3-4 months, but look at the results we've put into the business right now. Checkpoints, those showcases were an excellent opportunity. We didn't force every initiative leader every 2 weeks to stand up there and ring their bell, but sometimes it turned into a competition who could get up there first and grab the bell. That was great attitude, great mindset for people really wanting to show off what they'd done. But it was still a safe environment too, because they'd often come up and tell everybody what had gone wrong, what they'd learned along the way, and why they felt they needed to shut down their initiative and help others focus on theirs. That was seen as a positive. That was seen as a good result, not to be spending the bank's money on an initiative that's not going to take them anywhere. This Bell of Success board was one of the interim points we did. And it was a way to be able to visualize everything that had gone on over the last 9 months. I know it's a full year down there, but it was more kind of from March to December on here, about what had really happened across all these initiatives over that time. And we did this real time in the interim workshop with everybody in the room, literally listing out. The greens were what results of value did we observe over that period of time. The yellows were what lessons do we need to take away from this to make sure that we don't repeat that again, or make sure we put that into future initiatives. And the pink ones are really important. What risk is there that we won't be able to sustain this value in the business? As in, if we stop this initiative now, will that also remove the benefits that we've been seeing? How can we sustain that result of value for the longer term? And this was a great summary for everybody to understand what had been achieved and to hear it commonly in that one workshop. An example of what was kind of going on of the period before we got these initiatives operating was, so for example, each quarter they had to produce a particular report, and the way in which things had been operating was that they just had no idea about who was taking what role and responsibility, particularly when any adversity came along in the report production. So the unclear roles, the challenges with technology, which we were addressing through our IT initiative as well, and the time pressure to get reports out was just producing huge stress levels in the teams. It's not good that people go home with just enough time to have a shower and come back again, and then almost sleeping under the desks in those last few days of each quarter. Had to get that resolved. We had to get away from this incident, and panic at the end, and make things much smoother. Equally, overtime was listed as 35 hours for a team of like 2 or 3 people in that few weeks leading up to the end of the report. Shifting that down to just 10 was a much more manageable state. So there were some really good results coming out of this. So I'm going to hand you to Dee now. She can talk about some broader enablers we put in place and how they worked.
Yep, and I think we're doing just about okay time-wise as well. We may even have time for some questions if you have some. So, have I gone 2? Of course I have. Now I've gone back 1. Yeah, there we go. Right, so what did the work that we do, actually what changes did it actually bring about? Because obviously, you know, it all sounds great, but if it doesn't actually bring about any positive change, then there's not much point us having been there. So empowerment was quite a big thing. As Julian said, there were these 23 different initiatives. You know, we also had these people from business that we were trying to train and coach to be able to work with IT. And actually taking accountability for an area that you're working in. It's something that people haven't really had to do before. It was a very hierarchical organisation, as I think a lot of banks typically are. And by making sure that the sort of leads of each of these initiatives were people there that we were supporting with ways of working, it really gave them that feeling of empowerment to actually go and do things for themselves rather than waiting for the manager to tell them what they needed to do next. There was also a huge culture change. As you can see, I mean, you know, this is just an example of some guys in suits playing the ball game. By the time we came to produce that Bells of Success board that Julian just showed, people were actually turning up to work in jeans. Now, in that banking environment, that really was not a normal thing. You know, and it wasn't just to dress like the ThoughtWorkers or to be cool and trendy. I think people just generally felt more comfortable, and that was reflected in their clothes. Making sure that all of the goals that we had were SMART goals, so making sure that we could measure things, that they were realistically and timely, you know, that we did constantly look at how we were doing, what the milestones were, whether we were achieving those or not. Making sure that there was this transparency of the approach that we were taking. Everything was up on the walls for everyone to see at any point, and the COO did come and do Gemba walks every now and again around the department, and he'd come into our area and sort of do a sweep of it all. And he was actually very enthusiastic about the way that we had everything sort of displayed for everyone to see, the more visual ways of working, and also enabling through pairing. So both the concept that business and IT were paired up in order to sort of drive some of these change initiatives, but also that we paired as coaches with people there to create a coaching community that could then pick up and carry on after we'd actually left. So some of the communities that we set up while we were there, I talked about the coaching community. So we had a number of training courses that we'd developed. So we actually sort of had this train the trainer model where initially we would do the training courses and they would attend, and then they'd do one sort of supported by us because we always pair when we do a training course, and then they would actually facilitate it themselves with us in the audience. So sort of taking that and moving that on so that they were then able to sort of go around the business after we'd gone and hold those trainings. We also set up what we called a retrospective community. So we started off by facilitating some retrospectives for people so that we actually were getting some learnings. How were things going in terms of the ways of working and this sort of culture of continuous improvement. But we also trained people up as facilitators. And the idea was that we would have a pool of retrospective facilitators who could go and facilitate retrospectives in other people's areas. So you sort of always had these neutral facilitators that could go around so that everybody that needed to be involved in the retrospective actually could take part rather than needing to try and think about how to facilitate it as well. We had a lean coffee community. So every couple of weeks we would hold a lean coffee session where it was open to anyone to come along. The agenda for it was also open, so people could come and say what they would like to talk about. We then voted on that and we sort of took those in priority order, and that could be anything from how to write a good user story to how to sort of do visualization of work. And we also got involved in the Step Change initiative, which was something that was going on in the bank at the time to actually try and sort of culturally transform them. So we made sure that the work that we were doing was actually aligned to that initiative as well, so that it would also be more sustainable. Right. This is the collaboration hub that Julian talked about. As you can see at the top, this was what it was like when we arrived. Pretty beige, pretty bland. This was like what it was like on the day that we left. And there was quite a lot of work involved in taking some of that down and moving it, because they also moved offices at the same time. But you can see that we don't get sponsored by any post-it note company, incidentally, because people sometimes ask us if ThoughtWorks owns a post-it note company. We don't. We just use an awful lot of post-it notes because we really believe in visualization of work. So if we look at it it is going to move. In a little bit more detail, I'll walk you around the hub. So this is where the COO would come and do his Gemba walks and find out about the work that we were doing with them. So you can see here, over on the left-hand side, we've got the business transformation guide. So this was a picture of the whole team from the kickoff. We've got the vision, we've got the objectives, we've got a little bit of a progress plan. So at a very, very high level of the 23 initiatives, what's going to start, when, how long it's likely to go on for, so that we could help that with managing our dependencies via the dependency map that we had there. Obviously, the dependencies were also sort of translated into objectives and things that people had to mitigate down in the individual initiatives themselves, but we left this up on the wall because it was actually a great conversation piece. This is actually a corridor going through to some meeting rooms, and it was amazing how many people would stop on their way through to a meeting room and just ask why there was a spider on the wall. The lockers at the back, we weren't allowed to move the lockers out of the space, so we just thought, well, we'll just use them. We weren't going to use them as lockers anyway. We'll just cover them in post-it notes. So you can see our sort of progress board at the back there for the ThoughtWorks team with the various initiatives that we were working on. So we had the initiative, which was the sort of agile IT and business sort of alignment. We had the business transformation piece, and we had some sort of working with people on a more hands-on day-to-day sort of basis as well. We captured our bells of success on one cupboard door to make sure that, again, we made sure we celebrated them. And not just at the time that people got to ring the bell, but we kept the key milestones up there so that anyone coming through could actually see what the achievements of the teams had been over a course of time. And then we had an individual locker door for each of the transformation initiatives themselves. So sort of a status of how it was doing, any sort of key issues that they had, any blockers. So again, that information could just be seen sort of as somebody could come along and actually get an overview of all 23 initiatives really, really quickly. And then finally, because we ran out of wall space, we had a number of movable whiteboards that we had to buy in. So I have one there which I was using for my IT Agile alignment stream, and then we had another one which we used with the program leaders of that business transformation program to sort of plan out the main areas of work for that. So quite busy, but quite useful. So what changed as a result of us being there?
Yeah. Just to note on those other two last whiteboards there, they were movable, which meant that we could actually take them to areas in the office where people were actually based and make them engage in what we were discussing too. So that was also very useful. So what changed? What difference did we make? Well, a few quotes from the client, if they're willing to come up.
I've clicked twice, so we're
Okay,
probably going to
well,
go forward
let's just
2
pause for
slides
it,
now.
Exactly. One of the key things we learned in there was that they'd never seen collaboration like this before, and it made a massive difference to them. Actually, just learning collaboration techniques and being able to work closely with IT and within their own department and understand the value of collaboration made a huge difference. We also were very goal-driven with them too, as we mentioned earlier. This was also quite transformational. Up to that point, it was just such a how do we just survive kind of mentality. But now they truly had goals they were working towards. They had a department goal, they had goals within these initiatives, and each of those could be qualified as to whether they were delivering success or not. And we constantly revisited whether those goals were actually the right thing to now striving to do. Again, that made a big difference. The retrospective culture, and these were all genuine quotes, the retrospective culture was absolutely awesome. It was amazing by the time we left. We just literally could leave it running on its own. And the great thing was we were finding ever more departments or areas asking these new coaches we created, or these new independent facilitators, to come and get engaged with them as well. So we were beginning to permeate the organisation with some of that mindset, which was excellent. With the reusable processes and techniques, I think the 140, it's a lot bigger than that, Dee, 140 slides.
It might have been 240. I might have edited it down.
Yeah, I think so, basically. And there was an appendix of 100 and something as well.
Yeah.
So that was really useful, obviously. Getting that down to something people could process and understand was really critical. Also, getting it into the language of the business was also critical. You know, the moment we start walking in with agile buzz phrases, the business just turned off and shut down immediately. Getting it into their terms, getting it in their mindset was really important if we wanted them to come on this journey with us.
And just getting things into Confluence as well. So rather than having a big slide pack, actually sort of taking some of those pages that were slides that were buried away somewhere and just getting them into a reusable wiki where people could actually edit them themselves and make improvements to them if they wanted to.
So last two, change the way we think. Again, that's about that culture of collaboration, about wanting to actually drive to a goal. And also, most critically, the thing that made most change how they thought was about the need to demonstrate constant progress. They'd always been in a big bang environment. You know, give me 3 months and I'll come along with an end result and obviously be disappointed when I actually show you what I've done, as opposed to let's find out along the way and feel safe to be able to come up with demonstrating value or failure on a regular basis such that they could learn from that was a really big change. And if you want to know what that's all about, the bottom one down there, we now know how to use Post-it notes, another gratuitous plug for the workshop tomorrow.
I will show you, if you come.
If it'll click, we'll go to the next one.
So this one.
Oh,
Go
that
to.
one.
Yeah,
So, there's a lesson for me, shouldn't use Chrome for slides. So, summary. It was a really excellent opportunity to have to be able to work inside business as opposed to the classic IT-only environment. They were very siloed between both business and IT in their organisation, and I don't think we changed the way in which the org chart was drawn, but we definitely changed the way in which they felt they needed to integrate and operate to work successfully together. That was a really huge cultural change across the two. I think some of it was a bit of banging heads together, but some of it was just about coming up with some common understanding of working practices that both could work with and understand the value of following. They're now obviously looking at how they use lean and agile practices in everything they do within the business. It is constantly about trying to optimize their ways of working, optimizing the flow of results, and thinking about constant improvements in every aspect of what they do. And a lot of that does not involve having to use IT as part of their work. We hope that they did enjoy learning and working with us along that process as well. That was definitely our approach. It was our team wasn't, as you might assume, the consultants there working with the teams. We were working typically at the strategy of how this change was going to work. But the rest of the team and the people involved here, and we didn't have all these people on site at the same time. We brought in the skills as and when they were required. They were pulled from delivery projects in ThoughtWorks. These are people who are hands-on, day in, day out, typically delivering projects for clients. They came into this environment fresh from that kind of work and able to apply their skills directly into that environment. So it was all about hands-on demonstration and pairing with people to learn from working with us, as opposed to us telling them just what to do, which made a massive difference. And so basically at that point, I think we have got a bit of time
6 minutes.
in case you've got any questions.
5 minutes now.
Yes.
How did you overcome the issue of people that didn't want to change, especially in the banking culture? I work in a bank myself, and there's quite a few people there that close to retirement or just, no, don't want to change, I'm happy with how I do things now, especially people with power in that position.
So to repeat the question for the live stream, so how do we deal with resistance to change and people who basically died in the wool, you know, basically it's how we've always done stuff kind of reactions. It's never easy. You can obviously work with some people who are early adopters and actually start to demonstrate value. That was definitely one approach to it. So if you've got some people who are more willing to come on that journey with you, and you can start to demonstrate through them the value that others might get from coming on this journey with us, then it tends to draw people along too. People get drawn to success a little bit more easily. For others, though, we just had to sit down and understand what their challenges were. The hopes and fears exercise that Dee showed right at the start gave them, right from day one, the opportunity to say, I don't think this will work because, or I don't think I need to change. And we could get that dialogue going quickly. And by getting that out in the open made a huge difference. So get those kind of things help.
I think also, once you start being successful, people like to see that and they want some of that themselves. So I think there was quite a lot of skepticism at the beginning because they were so hierarchical, so bureaucratic, oh, these ways aren't never going to work here, sort of thing. I think with the IT business alignment piece, starting small with a small improvements team, getting some wins with that actually generated a bit of momentum. And with the business transformation piece, where we have these 23 different initiatives going on, once some of the early initiatives started to work, people just, even if purely for career development, sort of getting ahead kind of motivations, they saw that it was working, they saw that it was well regarded by senior stakeholders, and that makes a huge difference. They wanted to be part of it more as well. So there were some people that were very much on the edges of some of those early initiatives, quite stiff. And once they saw that other people were getting some recognition from leading their teams successfully, they wanted some of that as well.
Any other questions? Let me hand you the microphone. You can tell us directly your question.
How did you squeeze time?
How do we squeeze time?
For this presentation, or?
No, sorry, clearly they're all very, very busy people. How did you find the time to have
all of this
very good
teaching
at the start of the project?
This was understood right from the start by our major stakeholder that time for change was critical if any change was going to occur. And she ensured that a core team of people were given the opportunity to take time out to drive this. Equally, they wanted to accelerate the path of some of their team members who they felt that they could give empowerment to and give them the opportunity to drive this change. They'd been there long enough and had the experience enough to know what needed to change. So what they did was they decided to backfill those people who were going to learn from them for the first few months and then backfill and take on the responsibility of their roles, allowing those people to step more into a change role as well. So there was quite a significant investment, but they were doing it internally by making sure that they kept all those skills within this grown group of people.
I think also if you compare the cost of that investment versus the regulatory fines of not doing it and the attrition rate that they had, people doing all this overtime every quarter, you know, it was ridiculous, the stress levels when we first went there. I think it was a very conscious decision to make that investment to try and improve things, but also to sort of get away from having those regulatory fines. So they actually thought it would cost in.
I think we've got time for one more, right at the back.
Oh, we've got two.
I'll reiterate.
Just while we're on cost, what sort of budget spent on this project?
What budget was spent on this project?
I don't think that's something that we can...
I can give you numbers. So we had an average of four of us consultants there over the 12 months. And they invested in adding, I think, about 10 new staff into their team to backfill for these lead people. And they were still able to perform all of the operational work they were currently doing. So they didn't scope their standard work. So that would give you an indicator of the amount of time and effort it took. In the department, we were talking, was it 160 people in the department kind of thing? So 10 added into the 160 department with an average of 4 of us over that time period. I think you can start to do the maths from there, hopefully.
I think there was one question over there. We've got 1 minute left, so maybe we can try and take that as well.
Can you
Okay, so who owned the initiatives? The initiatives project was led by a pair of people from within the bank. They were the most senior members of the regulatory reporting group, reporting to the head of department. They were overall owners of that. But they were tasked very much with ensuring that they empowered and gave control out to all the individual initiative owners as much as possible. And they actually used us to help them with that by basically saying, look, don't come to us all the time trying to ask us what the answer is. Work with ThoughtWorks so they can facilitate you working it out for yourself. And so they were very much empowering through that way. And that, I think, seems to work quite well.
Yeah. Cool.
I think we're done on
I think
time.
it's 4 o'clock exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.